Okay, I think no need to switch back and forth. Forgot to open up the start screen. Right, I hope this is working. Let me just double check this real quick. See that the live stream picked up. That looks good. All right, closing again to not produce artifacts. All right, hello, welcome to today's stream. Today I won't be playing around with any Claude code or AI or anything. So I hope you don't mind. Today's topic is code review and quality and everything. So brace yourself for some deep discussions. One thing from the beginning now, I don't think anybody's watching live yet, but I hope the music works now. I got some comments on recent videos that the music was too loud, or that I should remove it completely, but I feel like without anything, without any music, it's might be a little silent at times, especially for like AI videos where I need to, or where I don't have something to talk all the time. So I'll keep the music, but I try to keep it silent. So if somebody finds the music too loud still, let me know, then I will turn it down further. And I hope everything else works. All right, so this is an extension. It has my name as a publisher, but it's mainly developed, and the main idea was by Sparebrained Licensing, now Sparebrained Ideas, and the head behind that is my fellow MVP Jeremy. And I took this as an example to walk you through how I do code reviews. Now, I want to be absolutely transparent with this. The code review service that this is all about is a paid service of mine, but I still found it interesting, or think it's interesting, to see a little bit behind the curtains, like what rules do I do, how does the tooling look like that I use, and maybe some ideas that you can also adapt for yourself and for your own code reviews in your company or whatever you do to improve or drive quality. All right, so just one thing at the start, I've also linked this into the description. This is not necessary. So my service page on my company site basically it describes all of this in a little bit of more detail. And I've also listed, and this is what we will be looking at today a little bit, all the different rules that this review that I do runs against. And it basically contains two different areas. One is basically derived from ISO 5055, which is a software measurement or review standard, language independent mostly. And this is versioned, this is nothing new. There are many like versions already, and like many rules in this. Gone. And this has 119 rules. Now this is annoying. I have evaluated all of them in detail, and not all of them are fully applicable. We'll see that in a minute. And then on top of this, I am maintaining a, I call it a quality framework, but a set of rules. Not sure where this link links to. Okay. A set of rules on top, which are custom to AL development and things that I find most valuable for, or very important for AL development. The same link again. Okay. So this said, let's jump into the code. So the first starting point maybe is a quality assessment I also offer, and this is actually a free service you can leverage on my website as well. Let's see. This doesn't work. Reveal, which is basically like a review just to give you a little bit of a scoring, like how many validations or violations you had, potential findings, how many rules were evaluated, just like a quick scoreboard, so to speak, which runs my analyzer in the background, a little bit of explanation. And this is, again, this is a free offering. But this is not what I like done with the promoting things. Why does this keep coming up? Now let's look at some rules in detail. One thing I wanted to show you is what happens to this, or how the code looks like with the default analyzers. So normally you would probably have a configuration similar to this. Let me just copy this. Let's disable this one and activate for AppSource cops the code cop, the UI cop, and the AppSource cop. Just like this. And let's remove the active 5 filter. So those are the warnings or the diagnostics that we get from this extension. All right, so let's switch back to the problems view. We have internal visibles too, which is correct. Declared by reference but never used, and a few text constants that are not translatable objects. And that's it. Spelling also complains, but beyond that, there are no further issues in this repository. I'm not sure if the rule set is configured for pretended extension cop to run in parallel. That might throw some false positives here. Okay, now we have some audience here live with me. Again, my question, I've asked it in the beginning, is the music in the background disturbing, or is it just right, or does it need adjustment? Okay, continuing, waiting for the answer, but continuing. Pretend extension cop doesn't change the picture. Now, if I would add the AL cops like this, well, test automation we don't need, but everything else, then the picture changes a little bit. We have some more warnings from the, or more diagnostics from the community review code cops. For example, modify without a parameter. For example, let's close this. Also datetime date. For example, let's see, commit needs a justifying explanation. If you're familiar with the lintercop project, you probably recognize many of them. Others might be new. There is also cognitive complexity here involved with some warnings. Let's see if we have some more. Public procedures must have documentation. Tooltip must start with specifies. There are many things in here that could still be improved. So this would probably be also a project on its own to also address all of those, or many of those things that are complained about here from those. And now let's switch back to the. Now I need to enter this because I think it's VS Code complaining about, or trying to get access to my SSH key here for GitHub. 1 second. All right. Let's go back to the settings and paste my review analyzer here. So what I've built is a proprietary analyzer. I won't share the source code of, but I can show you a little bit of what it complains about or what it shows us. So and the diagnostics here are different now, and we have about 500 of them. So let's see a little bit what this reports. For example, it says that the permission property read insert modify declares more access than the object requires. Let's see. Come on. Well, this is, to begin with, it's an obsolete object, so there is no body in here anymore. So it's actually correct. This is what this analyzer tries to find, things like this. Now in my review process, I would flag this as a either false positive or a justified exception, because while the warning is correct, it doesn't mean anything because there is no code in here anymore and probably should be removed, but doesn't need to because the entire object will be removed soon. But there is more to this. So we see that this is a CWE 732. So this means this is mapped to the ISO 5055 standard. So if we, what was it, 732, we go on to this, 1 second, 732, incorrect permission assignment. Permission sets grant broader access than intended, expose sensitive data or operations to unauthorized users. Now this is the general explanation of that CWE. So if we click the link, we can actually see the definition here. And this is mainly about security. I believe the rule is also in the security section. Yeah. So, I mean, this is about indirect permissions. Not sure if there is really a security risk here, but I still find that defining more permissions than actually needed should be fixed. It's not that clean. That's why I decided to map this on here. Let's see if we can. Okay. Let's go to another rule. For example, well, that's a very specific one for performance or patterns in this case. Let's see for EAT-10. Missing explicit read isolation on record read. So reads without explicit read isolation defaults to escalate update logs invisibly, causing concurrency degradation under load. Basically, just very simple. We do a find operation. There is no read isolation. It also finds a few other things. We're also missing load fields, and we do not have a set current key. Now this one's also interesting because it's something I probably want to revisit. I'm not sure why this doesn't show up. Maybe I need to update my website a little bit. But in general, ISO 5055 says that we shouldn't rely on properties that are not guaranteed. And I didn't find any documentation, I believe, about the fact that when we do not specify the current key, that the primary key is being used. Again, this might be something, there might be a stretch to assume this or to require this. That's why this rule is also under review. I think I will update this and remove this because it doesn't make that much sense. Let's see some more rules. Read without read isolation. You can see there is a lot of things going on. The 1083 is very, very prominent, and you can see that everything's green here. And I think this might be one. I wanted to keep this to the end a little bit more, but I guess we'll look at it now. 1083, see? Data access from outside expected data manager. Extension code is reading with or writing data in ways that bypass the standard BC table access model and circumvent business logic and logging. Let's look at the definition. The product is intended to manage data access through a particular data manager component, such as relational or non-SQL databases, but contains code that performs data access operations without using that component. And now I've been going through all of those rules in detail, had AI explain them to me. There is also more documentation, by the way. If we look at this link, it doesn't have direct links to the individual CWEs, since it's just a big PDF. But if we search in here, why is 1083 not in here? Reliability, do I have this mapped wrong? No. Let's see, there are only 4 categories and security, I think, is not one of them. Interesting. So those are regularly the PDFs to explain the entire definition of all of this. So this might have a different numbering. Let's search for data manager. Data access control from outside the data manager. There we go. So this is a different number mechanism, but in general, it contains a very detailed description of all of this stuff. And here is a more detailed explanation of what's going on. But essentially, for this particular rule, what I have mapped this to is accessing or writing data by direct assignment. And like circumventing the logic that is or might be defined on the table on how to control data access. Which means in particular, or in detail, that there are 2 different diagnostics on the same rule, basically. First of all, that the order of field assignment and operation has to follow the standard of how pages interact with tables. Meaning we first run init, we then validate the primary key fields, and then we call insert true, which is exactly what pages do. And then we do this the same for all the remaining fields, calling on validate and then doing a modify true, which is what I've considered, or what I consider the proper way of assigning and setting data. Now, there might be exceptions, of course. Every rule has its exceptions. I think those are fine, but those have to be documented. This is how I usually do this. Whenever there is a clear reason not to call validate, it should be documented correctly. But essentially, this is this rule. So it throws on everything that is not compliant. That's why we have so many of those warnings, because it flags every single field access which doesn't fall in this order. So if we run this, you can see that this is just complaining about primary key field before insert. So just need to check what's the primary key. It's just the entry ID. Oh, it falls. Okay, there might be a false positive here. Let's also convert those real quick. You can see now it's going, the warnings disappear because now we have the entry number before the inlet, and then here we need to modify still. Now I already find more warnings that I probably need to adapt. We set values to a parameter or through a variable that is local and not by reference, and we do not modify them after. We do not pass them further, or we do pass them further down. So they might be modified down below, but this would be a pattern I would probably also add, just for visibility, that you set fields, but you maybe forgot to modify. Let's see. Yes, 778. Let's go back to the rule list. 778. Insufficient logging, security critical events, permission escalation, bulk data export, financial posting not captured in telemetry, leaving no audit trail. Now telemetry here needs an update because I've changed the rule a little bit recently. But in general, we say that we should care about logging. And this is account data as data classification, which triggers this rule saying, well, this seems to be important. You might want to consider capturing it in changelog. And the rule checks whether you have one of those data classifications set to other than basically system metadata, I believe. We have account data, customer content. Yeah, basically anything other than system metadata is worth logging, especially the data privacy, like the identifiable information, should be logged. And it checks whether your install code unit adds those tables and fields to the changelog automatically. Now, whether the customer has changelog activated or not is a different story. But having it configured correctly, like having the extension configure itself correctly for changelog, what it recommends, I think is not a bad thing. Now let's see. Isolated storage set without corresponding delete in the same scope. Now this checks whether there is a delete procedure in that code unit, because I assume that there is a ISO store manager like we have here, and it just scans whether there is like everything implemented that comes with the isolated storage. And we can also check the CWE explanation for this. Incomplete cleanup. So this is something ISO cares about. The product does not properly clean up and remove temporary and supporting resources after they have been used. Again, I had to adapt this a little bit of what patterns we do have in AL, but I think leaving isolated storage traces in the ISO storage is not necessarily good practice. So cleaning up would be nice. Now I know we do not have something like on uninstall extension or something, and I'm also not sure if the cleaning, if you do uninstall with removal of data, if that takes care of isolated storage and things. So once we would get an event like this, I would probably add this coverage to this rule. But in general, we should do what we can do, and I think isolated storage offering a delete procedure in this code unit would be nice. There are more warnings here related to isolated storage. Let's see. Isolated storage set without confirmed encryption. This is custom rule. I'm not sure if this one needs it or not. What is this even? This is the app value, so this is not that important. Then I would, in an actual review, as I already mentioned, I go through all of those findings in detail, like one by one, and I look at the examples, and if they are true, false, positives, I'll probably fix my analyzer first and then regenerate the findings. Or if it's a true hit from the analyzer view, I would go in and explain all of this. So if you're curious about how this report looks like, I have an example on my website as well. Maybe I can show this real quick. This is an example report. So this one is a shorter one with 30 pages only. And I will explain everything in detail. All the findings are in here, and the findings themselves can have accepted risks like this or like an additional explanation. So in the end, this is about documenting all of this. And then if there is a violation for something that you would flag, you can either put in a code comment as well, or you can have the separate documentation saying, no, this is fine. We know that this came up in the review, but there is explanation on why this is okay. Now, other things like this, there are a few things throwing on the same thing here. So we have an ISO 10, a CWE 1052 reporting. Let's go back. 1050. Gone. 1052. Excessive hard coding literals. And then also AppSource COP3, which is particular about error messages having hard-coded values, because that is something that throws up in telemetry, basically. Then you don't get the error message in telemetry if you don't reuse a label with replaceable things, replaceable parameters. So all of those kind of things. Let's see if we have some more. Missing tooltips. For user documentation purposes, of course. Oh, this is, no, it's not filtered, okay. Magic numbers basically flags anything that is that the one we had just had? Yes. It flags everything that is hard-coded, basically. And I have, it's either has to be a label, or if it has to be an integer or something, I've like said that if we have a procedure returning exactly one thing only, for example here, I would, can I refactor a single value? No, I cannot. The way I would say that this is okay would be a procedure to say we have 24 hours in milliseconds, and it's not a duration, but in this case an integer. Not sure if that equals to the same amount, but it still flags, because those are new magic numbers inside here. I would do this. And then call it here. Now this is probably a different problem. Yeah, this is a false positive, okay. Let's see. Come on. Like this. And then it's not a magic literal anymore, because this is self-documenting like what this number is about. And the reason for this is, I mean, while a code comment here serves the same purpose, either I can reuse this function to get the value, and reduce duplication in code, or I can remove that comment now. Yeah, there is a parentheses missing. And then it makes it easier for me to read this because I don't need to wonder about what this number is. In worst case, we wouldn't even have a code comment to explain what this equals to. And then it's absolutely unreadable. So this is why this rule exists. Also, for those kind of things, I would just use locked labels to... I mean, it's hard for me to explain why, actually, and I don't really know. Things like this, I think, again, would be... Not sure if it helps readability in that case. I think two reasons for why I would expect this to be in a label. Either if it really improves readability or reusability. But in this case, I'm not sure if anything of this would be worth the refactor. And that means I either would still flag it, or if it really doesn't make any sense and just makes the code less readable, then I would probably also flag this as, yeah, I mean, technically it is a warning, but in practice, we wouldn't change this because it gets worse if we do. I hope that explanation doesn't make any sense. Let's see. Problems. See if we have something more. This is also interesting. I didn't have this before in practice. Mixed and or operations without explicit parentheses. Let's see, 783. It's part of maintainability and part of security. Let's see the explanation. So AL operators precedence rule differ from C family languages. Complex Boolean expressions without parentheses frequently evaluate incorrectly. I don't think so in AL. In AL, it's pretty clearly defined what happens. Actually, no, this is interesting. So we have this, or this, or this and this. Now, is it this together? Like or, and then and? Or is it or, and the and is evaluated first? Does anybody know this? Because I don't. Let's see if we can find out in documentation. Condition. Is it control statements? Conditional statements. Programming conventions. Let's see if we can find. Okay, this doesn't seem to explain it. there's not either. So I'm not sure if there is documentation about what is evaluated. I would assume the end gets evaluated first, but not sure. So I think the warning is justified. That at least if it's like, I mean, if it's clearly documented somewhere and I just wasn't able to find it, might be the case, then I think security or reliability is not a concern. But readability is a concern because, like, weird cases like this, I think putting an extra set of parentheses or like refactoring this into procedures to clearly indicate what happens improves readability directly, and that way we can save discussions like we just have right now, where readers of the code, developers who need to read the code afterwards, need to figure out what is the condition that triggers this block. Let's see. Error called without error info. I was wondering, my chat is in German. Okay, that's interesting. The live chat view I have does automatically translate into German for me. I was already wondering why people write German. Okay, so if I hover it, I get the English original. Evaluation happens left to right in if statements. Let's go back. That means. So that means we do get or, and then at the end it gets chained with an end. Is that what you mean? Which would probably make sense the way this is written. But anyways, I think it could be clearer. So I was talking about error info. Where was it? There we go. This is PAT03. Errors raised without the richer error info pattern, foreclose collectible errors, and user actionable fix-it actions in the platform supports. Which is basically just user experience, mostly, both things. So instead of just throwing errors like this, and I think this is even a good example. No, this is actually not a good example. Because nothing you can do inside the client to fix this error message. Let's see if we have more errors. License activation succeeded, but subscription metadata is incorrect. Configuration issue. Activation failure. No subscription found error. This is maybe a good example. Instead of just saying, well, there is no license in the license list, we could create an error info object, an error info error message. Then we can offer a navigate action to open up the license page list for the user so they can directly click on the error message onto the error message link. Let's see if we can open up an example. Business Central action errors. Like this. Not sure if this is big enough. Can open image. There we go. this is how it looks like, and this only works with error info. That's why I flag in reviews that using error infos is the better approach. You can also log additional information like additional dimensions or record IDs and things, just to make it easier to also then act. I mean, if it's an error the user just needs to fix themselves, doesn't really help that much to have metadata info in the background. But if it's an error that support has to fix, having additional information as custom dimensions in the emit is probably quite helpful. All of that can be done with error infos. Now this one might be also interesting. A return value is discarded. Sorry, my nose is tickling. 252. Unchecked return value. Now you can open the website. You can read through all of this yourself if you're interested. But essentially, there are the main idea is the function returns something, and we do not check the return value. Now, for things like code unit run, this might be intentional, and in this case, again, it's an accepted thing. We get the warning. We do say, well, this is not a problem here because it's intentional, and we go on. But in many cases, we can catch the return value to at least throw a proper error message. Again, user experience. For example, if we have an unprotected get somewhere, not sure if we do have, those are evaluates. I'll come back to this example. Not sure, but here Jeremy did a very good job in not doing unprotected gets, because I think he's also advocating this rule. But in general, the idea is whether it be a get or an evaluate like this, there might be default platform error messages, but they don't give any reason, right? So if you have a get on a record and the get fails, it will just say, well, the record wasn't found. But the user has no idea why we need the record. He might see the filters, but beyond that, no information of reasoning of how to fix this, why it's a problem. Is it a system problem or a user solvable problem? Like, what's going on? So we can improve the user experience drastically by catching the return values and then throwing a proper error message or proper information or handling it somehow, auto fixing it, whatever. There is lots of potential for improvement based on this rule alone. And then we had another one I wanted to get back to. For example, here. There is a procedure, a custom procedure, that returns something. Right? So, not sure if this also has error messages in here, potentially. But it also has a return value. So by using or calling the function with the return value, I think in general, the assumption is if a procedure returns something, it returns it for a reason. And just not observing the return value might be against what the function's intention was. That's why this is a warning in my system, so that I can look into those cases in particular and figure out, is this a problem or not? In general, I would say if the return value is not necessary, the procedure shouldn't return the value. and then everything's fine. If it's supposed to just throw error messages or do nothing, like just work, then the return value is not needed. But if it is there, I should do something with it. That's the general rule. I think that applies. Let's see if we have some more. Also happy to, like, if anybody has any questions, shoot them into the chat. I try to read them out loud and then answer them, of course. So this shouldn't be just a lecture of how I do code review. I think we had this one already. Oh no, this is another one. 1049. Find set is called without preceding filters. 1049. Reports and queries that join too many tables and nest too many subqueries against large trans. What happened? Sometimes I just click things on my. This was like 2 buttons on my mouse. Too many subqueries against large transaction tables generate disproportional database load and cause query timeouts. So it's a general to be cautious about calling find set on complete tables. Now this again is flagged, and I think extension licenses is a candidate of not many records. But in general, I want to see those and say, well, no, in this example, this is fine. But in general, setting filters does make sense. Now this is even an upgrade code unit, so we do actually want to run over all of those and update everything correctly. So this is intentional. This is something I've added. Delete all without preceding is empty check. Not sure if anyone has seen that before. I also just noticed here's a warning missing because it should be delete all true, right? So running the trigger explicitly, or like running the trigger should be the default. So this should be warned on. But looking at the PAT 12, bulk deletion operations without first checking whether the filter matches any rows can acquire logs unnecessarily. I think this is documented somewhere in the guidelines and things like sites as well. Not sure if you know this. The BC guidelines.dev, I believe, is the no. Oh, it's AL guidelines. Yeah, here. So here we have many things as well, and I believe can we search? Cannot. But, oh yeah, there we go. Delete all. There we go. Created and described by Waldo. When you perform a delete all where there is nothing to delete, it will still perform a log. So in general, 2 things, and it's even not complete in here. I think it wasn't updated in a while. We do check with is empty. And now one thing I can show you, if we add the is empty check here, if not, yeah, this is wrong. Like this. Then we get another warning that the record is modified without an update log, and is empty also without preceding load fields is complete garbage. This is not what I wanted to show you, but we read extension license without read isolation. I'm not sure actually, I would need to check this if read isolation update log is necessary for deleting. Isolation level update log. Detection doesn't work yet correctly. Okay, but you get the idea. Does it want assignment? Oh, this is what it detects. Okay. I like the procedure style better, actually. Okay, now it's just the false positive about set load fields on as empty, which is obviously not needed. But this is the way how it's expecting this to be done. Now I need to check on update log versus delete all if that's necessary or not. But in general, yes, exactly. The is empty could produce a table log. That's what I showed here. What Waldo described on AIR guideline staff. This is why I have the rule. My only question is I do want to have a table log though, I think, because while theoretically probably impossible, no, while practically probably impossible, theoretically there could be a data operation happening between this call and this call. So I check that there are records and then I call a delete all on that selection, and when I do not specify my update log read isolation for the is empty, we cannot guarantee that the delete all performs on the same set of data. That's the theory, at least. Hard-coded URLs are identified. That we shouldn't hard-code URLs. Now again, those might be accepted. Yes, the update log should be released as soon as possible, but that happens right after, right? Again, interesting questions. I've never really thought about this. What happens to the update log that I set on those records after I've deleted them? Because there is nothing left to log on, right? Does it still log the filtered set of data, so to speak? Or does it really release the logs? And I think also the benefit of isolation, of the read isolation on the record variable, is that the logs get released as soon as this variable goes out of scope, which is directly after here. But you're absolutely right. And this is, again, a nice observation. Let's see. I'm curious if this is documented correctly. This is exactly what I intend with this kind of review. Now this opened on another screen. Record instance isolation level. Previously, I only provided explicit isolation level via log table method. Following example, Hayden's the isolation level on the record instance. It takes the log on the last row, while subsequent reads won't trigger further logs to be taken. Such usage makes sense injections code, but it wasn't expected to introduce a log table call, causing subsequent reads against the same log table. Temporarily lowering. Difference between... It doesn't specify that, so that might be a question for Microsoft to answer or to find out ourselves on the SQL Server. So what it covers is that I can have like that the read isolation is limited to the record instance, while log table was for the entire table. Now this is probably because of a flow field or something that propagates the locking onto the currency table as well. Different story, but essentially it's limited to the local instance. And that's why I assume that the lock is only held as long as the variable is in scope, but I can't confirm it right now. I need to go back through to the video and find out the things that I've flagged and then fix them afterwards or find out the details. Oh, here we have a... Oh no, there's a JSON get which discards the return value. Also flag things like pragma warning suppression, so I can see where things got disabled to see if those were justified or not. This is also an interesting one, a case without an else, which again, in practice, you would probably say, well, we don't really have any alternatives here. But in terms of when we want to look at code through the ISO glasses, ISO 5055 glasses, we don't really care about application. This case doesn't have an else. If the environment information ever gets another value, this will run silently in a wrong way, because in this case, environment ID will be empty, which now can be assumed to always be populated. And that is a potential problem in the code, which is why I've also called this stream, like, how can we get to another level? Like, how can we make the code even better? And this is, in my opinion, by accounting for things like this, to say, well, this case doesn't have an else, and this is correct. If and the else statement could just be like, error message, unexpected value, this wasn't supposed to be happening, we need to look into this, but preventing the code from producing an unforeseeable outcome. Let's see more comments. Yes, exactly. The else branch always must be handled. And this is standard for different development or programming languages, which is exactly what we are doing here. We're taking the ISO 5055 standard and applying it as good as we can to AL code to say, well, we account for those development standards, and the ISO 55 thing is something that was, I think it's well established in other programming languages, and has been around for a long time and probably reviewed lots and lots of times for whether it makes sense or not. Now, the only thing here is whether my adaptation onto the AL language does make sense or not. .1088. Let's see. HTTP client calls without a timeout block. I think there is a default timeout, but setting it explicitly also probably doesn't hurt. So this is also being flagged here. In the specific case you're looking at, you probably have an idea of how long this should really take and handle the fact when something, if it runs too long, you can handle it, and you can handle it as explicitly. But I'm in general a big fan of setting things implicit value explicitly to show that you have thought about this. Same goes for insert. The default value is false, but if I just write this, nobody knows if this was intentional or just because I forgot to set the value to true, ideally. So if I set this to false explicitly, I show that this was an informed decision, or at least a decision that I've made. So same goes for timeout. Even if I set the default timeout explicitly, I show that this was, I'm not just using the default timeout, I want to have that timeout. Let's see if there's more. Otherwise, I think we might wrap up soon. Yeah, well, this is a classic text that should be translatable, which is not. Should be labeled. Yes, if the platform will change the default, your value will differ. And there are two possible ways this could, well, two possible outcomes. One would be the platform adjusts its timeout default upwards, basically, a longer timeout by default. It doesn't affect your code at all. And the other one would be to adjusting it downwards, making it a shorter default timeout. And then the question would be either your code performs the same way it did before because the default is not a cap, then your code actually is more resilient against those kind of changes, or it's a default and a new cap, then you either get a default an error message, or your code just runs against the platform cap before your custom timeout triggers. So I think it's still better to set it explicitly. I need to find a way to turn off those auto translations somehow in the chat. That's a little bit annoying. Nice that I can convince you with my explanations. But I like to discuss questions like this. I really appreciate the comments because, I mean, I'm also not, I mean, I don't know everything, and sometimes I also have my reasoning that I have with myself. I get it wrong. So challenging my approaches is always welcome. Okay, but I think apart from magic numbers and a few things in here, I think we are almost done with like walking through the examples that this gives. Yeah, let me know also in the comments maybe afterwards, like, what do you think? Is this something, am I going overkill here? Is this, what do you think? Is this justified? Does it add value? And if, yeah, I mean, always welcome to try the free assessment with your extensions. I do have a privacy policy and things in place that I do not keep the code or use it for anything. So if you want to get an idea of how your code holds up against what I've built here, let me know. You've seen there are a few things I still need to adjust. This is a living project. The automatic review obviously doesn't surface what are false positives, but it should give you a proper idea of like, are there a few things or are there many things? As you have seen, we have like 500 something 460 warnings in here. And if I open up that quick assessment again, this doesn't work. Reveal. It still scores with like almost 90%, which is a really good score, I believe. 85% on the ISO. And this is mostly because we have a few warnings in here, especially where's the... There are 260 warnings for ISO in total, which is 210 in reliability, which is mostly the missing validate triggers and everything. But I have tried to account for like repeated warnings like this in the scoring system. And ISO counts for 50% of the overall quality scoring. So as you can see, there are sometimes like 20 potential findings, but it's only 2 out of 7 rules or 3 out of 18 rules. And this is what is represented, or I try to represent in this scoring pattern. And like explanation and things. So you can get this one for free to get an idea. Another comment. I see value, but I also see challenges. No, this is okay. Not what I want to see for my project daily is exactly the thing. I do not have this enabled in my daily development either. I mean, I know about the rules. I try to apply them, but this is not meant to be an analyzer that is run all the time. As I said, it's a proprietary analyzer. I won't publish this one because it's for my service. But I wanted to show you what I do here. And now this would absolutely be too noisy for anything like this. It's meant to surface everything to me while I do a manual code review, and then I can decide on things like on findings, whether those are, again, false positives, true positives, or maybe positives that are justified and then should be documented. The idea is this review in general, this review has 2 target groups. One is developers to improve on this one-time review output, right? So taking this and reasoning for themselves or in the team or in the company, whatever, and figure out which places need improvement. The other target group is, not sure if I have that document still open. My example document. I do not. Let me open up that one again. I have examples on my website if you want to look through everything, and also I tried to explain everything in so much detail. But this is a quality assessment report. There is also a signature at the end. So whenever I do this service and I provide this report, in reality it will be much longer than this. Then I do sign this, and the idea is to document. So when you, not sure if we have any non-developers here in the audience, or later on maybe on demand, the report is targeted at like management level. So when you sell an app, and maybe not a PTE but rather an AppSource app, or if you buy an app, like as a customer, you get to a partner and have an app developed for you. Any developer says, no, the code is fine, and you can trust them. But maybe a different person confirming the code is fine, documenting the code is fine, is even better. And this way you have a document that is signed, that has any explanation in there, everything that was what was found, what's okay, the customer individual context, the explanation of why certain things have to be done this way, although it on the first glance would contradict the rules. Everything is in one document. It's signed. It can be archived. It's and that way the risk shifts from an unknown risk of like how I don't know what the code quality is. As a developer, of course, I know this, but if you think about anybody non-developer who is in higher management levels in the company, wouldn't know exactly, not for sure, what this code is about. And this is what I'm trying to solve here with this and with the documentation. So I hope that explains this a little bit. And again, I didn't want to do this as a selling session, but more like a explanation of like how I assess code reviews and what things I do care about, and giving you a little bit of an idea of how to maybe further improve your code against ISO 5055 standards. All right, I think wrapping up for now. How long do we have? Oh, over an hour already. All right, let's keep this one not too long. Again, let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think about this. Really interested in any feedback, any opinions, anything you might have. I hope the music wasn't too loud in this one. I turned it down quite a bit. And yeah, in case you haven't subscribed, always need to do the standard floskles right at the end. Try to, or if you want to get notified for future streams, you might want to consider subscribing, because I do not really announce them long before, as I need to see how those fit into my schedule. All right, then all that's left is saying have a nice day and talk to you next time. And a nice weekend. I mean, it's Friday. All right, bye.